There is a pattern in history that has destroyed empires without a single battle. It begins with a miracle and ends with a printing press. In ancient Rome, emperors once promised eternal prosperity. They clipped silver from the denarius to pay their armies and build monuments that defied time. For a while, the empire glittered brighter than ever, but when the coins lost their weight, so did the empire's trust, and within a century, Rome's economy imploded from within. In the 18th century, France repeated the illusion. John Law's paper money was hailed as a revolution in wealth creation, a system that could fund infinite progress. But within 3 years, the streets of Paris were filled with worthless notes and angry mobs. The dream of endless wealth ended in flames and fury. In Weimar Germany, the pattern resurfaced once more. The presses roared day and night. Wages rose by the hour, prices by the minute. Children built castles with banknotes that had lost all meaning. And in that madness, a nation's faith in itself evaporated. Even in modern times, the illusion returned when the world abandoned gold and embraced paper promises. Prosperity could now be printed. Markets soared, debts multiplied, and faith in money itself became a religion. The economy was no longer measured in value but in belief. But no empire, no nation has ever escaped the same ending. Because once a civilization learns it can create wealth without effort, the collapse is already written in its currency. And now it's happening again. The same cycle, optimism, denial, and decay is unfolding before our eyes. But this time, the presses are digital, the money invisible, and the illusion global. Picture this: the glow of trading screens replacing the echo of minting hammers, the hum of servers replacing the clang of coins. The world believes it has conquered history, yet the script remains unchanged. Every empire that prints its own miracle eventually funds its own destruction. Every civilization at its peak believes it has outsmarted scarcity. It finds a way to turn promises into wealth and convinces itself that debt is progress. But history proves otherwise. Money is not wealth. It is faith, a mirror of collective belief. And when that faith is diluted, empires dissolve not from invasion, but from within. The Romans believed they had found the key to infinite power. When their armies demanded higher pay and their borders demanded endless defense, emperors chose the path of least resistance. They reduced the silver in every coin. The denarius, once the symbol of stability, became a hollow promise. It glittered like before, but its value had been quietly drained. The illusion held until trust vanished. Markets froze, soldiers revolted, and an empire that once ruled continents could no longer afford its own survival. This is the first rule of decline. When leaders choose convenience over cost, they exchange discipline for delusion. Centuries later, the same illusion would infect entire nations. France in the 18th century, Germany in the 1920s, Japan in the 1980s, and America in the 21st century all believed they had found a way to print prosperity. Each had its justification, its intellectual defense, its promise that this time it's different. But the mechanism never changed. Because every currency, like every empire, carries within it a hidden law of entropy. The more it expands beyond the real value it represents, the more fragile it becomes. When the supply of money grows faster than the supply of productivity, trust erodes silently, at first, then suddenly all at once. Economists call it monetary expansion. Psychologists call it moral hazard. History calls it the beginning of decay. And behind that decay lies something deeper, a psychological addiction. Easy money changes not only economies but cultures. It rewards speculation over creation, short-term gains over long-term endurance. Societies once built on work and sacrifice begin to chase illusion and comfort. The currency weakens, but so does the character of the civilization that depends on it. The illusion of prosperity sustains itself until one thing breaks belief. When the public no longer trusts the value of the paper in their hands or the digits on their screens, the empire's authority collapses overnight. That is the true law of monetary civilizations. Wealth is not created by printing, It is borrowed from the future, and eventually the future demands repayment with interest measured in chaos. Every empire's collapse begins not with famine, plague, or war, but with a quiet shift in perception. When abundance feels infinite, responsibility disappears. When the cost of money feels cheap, the cost of truth becomes unbearable. The printing press doesn't just inflate prices, it inflates delusion. And by the time they realize it's too late, history proves it again and again. Every cycle begins with good intentions. A kingdom discovers a way to fund its dreams, and for a brief moment the future feels limitless. In Rome, that discovery came in the form of silver coins. The denarius was more than money. It was faith cast in metal. To hold one was to hold the empire's promise. But as the cost of expansion soared and the borders grew restless, emperors turned to alchemy, not of gold, but of illusion. They began clipping silver from each coin, stretching the treasury without raising taxes. It was genius for a moment. Armies were paid, roads built, arenas filled. To the people, life still glittered. The system still worked. But the coin's face, though unchanged, carried less truth. The people noticed. Merchants charged more soldiers, demanded higher pay, and hoarders melted old coins to hide real silver. The empire's money supply grew, but its soul decayed. Rome's inflation was not just an economic event. It was moral erosion disguised as prosperity. The citizens lost faith not in silver, but in each other, and the empire began to rot from the inside out. Centuries later, Spain repeated the miracle. Gold and silver flooded from the New World oceans of treasure so vast that the crown believed scarcity had ended. But with easy wealth came complacency. Industry declined, innovation stalled, and imports replaced production. When the treasure fleet stopped, the empire discovered that it had built no foundation, only appetite. In every age, the pattern begins with the same sin, confusing liquidity for prosperity. It feels righteous, even divine, but every ounce of easy money carries a hidden price. It dissolves the discipline that once built the empire. Picture this. The forges burn day and night. Coins flow like rivers, palaces rise under torchlight, but in the shadows the empire's spine softens. The illusion grows faster than reality can bear, but the pattern had already begun. Once the illusion takes root, it demands faith, not logic. Leaders, scholars, and citizens unite under one shared belief that their prosperity is permanent, their system invincible. In early 18th century France, that faith took the form of a man, John Law. A gambler, mathematician, and visionary, Law convinced the monarchy that paper could replace gold. His Mississippi Company promised wealth as infinite as France's ambition. The printing presses rolled, stocks soared, ordinary citizens became millionaires. Paris transformed into the beating heart of the financial world. But illusions always overheat. When investors demanded gold instead of paper, the mask fell. The bubble burst. Within weeks, fortunes vanished, riots erupted, and Law fled Paris in disguise. France's experiment with easy money ended in humiliation, and decades later in revolution. 2 centuries later, Weimar Germany would follow the same path, this time in desperation. Defeated by war, buried in debt, Germany printed its way out of despair. At first it seemed humane, a way to relieve suffering without pain. But when every mark lost meaning, when wheelbarrows of money couldn't buy bread, the illusion turned grotesque. Families burned banknotes for heat. Children played with stacks of currency taller than themselves. The printing press had replaced the sword as the instrument of self-destruction. Each of these episodes follows the same emotional curve: hope, faith, euphoria, denial, collapse. Once an empire begins to print its own future, it also prints its own end. And yet every generation repeats the pattern. Why? Because the illusion of control is more comforting than the reality of limits. An empire addicted to its own money loses not just restraint, it loses self-awareness. Statistics replace wisdom. Optimism replaces prudence. The illusion of control replaces control itself. By the time the people realize the truth, it's no longer a crisis, it's destiny. Picture this crowd celebrating rising markets, rulers promising infinite growth, economists praising innovation, then silence. The numbers collapse, the empire pauses, and faith evaporates. By the time they realized it was too late, in the modern world, the printing press has no ink-only code, and yet the cycle remains unchanged. After 1971, when the United States severed the dollar's tie to gold, the world entered a new experiment, the first era of infinite currency. Money became abstract, limitless, backed only by faith. For decades it worked. The dollar reigned supreme. Markets boomed, credit exploded, and nations prospered. Economists celebrated a new paradigm, the end of boom and bust. But beneath the euphoria, the same rot was spreading. Debt grew faster than productivity. Speculation replaced production, and governments discovered they could buy time with freshly created trillions. The 2008 financial crisis was the moment the illusion cracked. When the system collapsed under its own leverage, central banks printed trillions to rescue it. It worked temporarily, but every rescue demanded a larger intervention. Every solution increased dependency. The world was no longer solving crises, it was postponing reckoning. Now in 2025, the presses have gone silent because they've gone digital. Money moves at the speed of thought. AI trades in microseconds. Liquidity is no longer printed but programmed, and yet the law remains: the same value cannot be created from nothing. Digital convenience has not abolished the cost of trust, it has only hidden it deeper. Today's financial system runs not on gold or paper, but on collective psychology. The belief that governments, markets, and central banks will always intervene. But faith is fragile. When it cracks, whether by inflation war or digital panic, collapse will not unfold in years but in hours. Cryptocurrency was meant to break the cycle. Instead, it joined it. Bitcoin became the new gold, then the new speculation, then the new delusion. Even in decentralization, the human hunger for easy money persists. Every empire believes it has transcended history until it discovers it has only digitized its fate. Picture this: screens glowing in the dark, algorithms trading invisible wealth, governments promising safety as debt towers into infinity. The empire of paper has become an empire of pixels, but mathematics still demands payment. History doesn't repeat, it evolves. And the next stage has already begun. Today, the illusion has reached perfection. The world no longer needs printing presses, coins, or even paper. We have entered the era of invisible prosperity, where money is infinite, but meaning is not. Governments no longer mint silver. They mint confidence. With a keystroke, they summon trillions from the void, digital promises born of collective faith. Central banks have become both priesthood and architect, issuing salvation in the form of liquidity. For now, the machine still hums. Markets rise, debt grows, and nations float on a sea of leverage so vast that even gravity seems suspended. The world's largest economies, the United States, China, Japan, and the European Union, now owe more than $300 trillion, and yet they call it stability. But like Rome's clipped coins or France's paper money, this modern system rests not on value, but on belief. The U.S. dollar, the world's reserve currency, is no longer a promise of gold, but a promise of trust. When that trust weakens even slightly, the tremors are global. In 2022, inflation returned to the West for the first time in a generation. Prices surged, wages lagged, and central banks, trapped by their own creations, fought the fire with the same fuel that caused it. Every solution demanded more intervention, more liquidity, more faith. The illusion was too fragile to question. Now in 2025, prosperity has become a performance, a digital mirage projected across screens and markets. We measure growth in digits, not in well-being. We celebrate record stock prices even as living standards decline. Money has lost its weight, and with it, its morality. People no longer ask, "What is money?" They ask, "How much can I borrow?" The more we create, the less it means, and yet the more we need it to survive. This is how civilizations drift, not collapse one generation, losing memory of cost to the next, losing meaning of value. We have mastered the art of prosperity without production, wealth without work, faith without foundation, and still the illusion deepens. The new empire does not wear crowns or wave flags. Its rulers are unseen, its weapons are invisible, and its empire stretches across servers and central banks. This empire is built on monetary power, the ability to create, manipulate, and destroy value with words and keystrokes. Interest rates replace armies, policy statements replace declarations of war, and markets respond with the obedience once reserved for kings. But this control is fragile. Each attempt to stabilize the illusion demands greater distortion. Every crisis requires a larger intervention than the one before. The empire of credit feeds on expansion, and the expansion feeds on belief. Even the challengers' cryptocurrencies, fintech revolutions, AI-driven trading have not escaped the cycle. Bitcoin, once the symbol of rebellion, became another speculative playground. Its promise of freedom drowned in greed, its value rising and falling like any other illusion of easy money. The global system now stands on a paradox. To sustain confidence, it must keep inflating. To maintain growth, it must keep borrowing. To appear stable, it must keep lying. When faith becomes policy, collapse becomes mathematics, and yet most remain blind because as long as the lights stay on and the screens glow green, the illusion feels real. But faith is finite. When the next crisis arrives, whether sparked by war energy or a digital panic, the system may not break in slow motion. It may vanish in real time, with markets freezing, currencies imploding, and belief evaporating faster than code can react. And in that silence, the question will return. The one empires always face at the end of their cycle. What is money when trust is gone? When that day comes, it won't just be an economic reckoning. It will be a spiritual one the moment the world remembers that money was never real. Only belief made real. Every empire believes its currency will last forever until the silence arrives. Markets flatten, trust fades, and the numbers that once defined wealth become meaningless symbols on a screen. History has no patience for illusions. Rome's silver, France's paper, Germany's marks, each was a masterpiece of ingenuity that became its own undoing. The pattern is merciless prosperity, created from nothing always returns to nothing. And now the pattern lives within us. The algorithms hum, the screens glow. We scroll through charts of artificial growth and call it progress. The world spins faster than its debts can be counted. We no longer measure wealth by truth, but by noise. Money has never been about metal or paper or code. It has always been about faith, the fragile agreement that tomorrow will honor the promises made today. When that faith dies, so does the civilization built upon it. The next collapse may not be visible. There may be no mobs, no fires, no empires falling in smoke, only quiet disbelief, a world that stops trusting its own reflection. This is how civilizations end now, not in chaos, but in silence. The fall will not be measured in ruins, but in confidence, one institution, one market, one citizen at a time. Not an explosion, but an erosion. Empires don't fall because they run out of money. They fall because they forget what money means. The moment we print trust, we lose it. And when history closes its balance sheet, the numbers will tell a single truth. We were rich in illusion and bankrupt in faith. History doesn't repeat it, reveals the cost of forgetting. And the final chapter of this cycle is already being written.